couple more minutes yet before officially 7 o'clock, so we'll wait.
If we're going to need it.
While we're all here and everybody's paying attention, welcome back after our 2-month summer vacation, or whatever you want to call it.
And I need to apologize for missing the last meeting because I have no excuse for it. I was just stupid.
Well,
You just forgot? Is that what you mean?
No, it was worse than that.
Oh.
you don't have to explain it.
Has it got anything to do with sobriety and
Oh,
utter drunkenness?
no, it has to do with computers not actually doing what it is that I think I did.
Oh,
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, my
so you're
computer's
talking to
connected.
the
Vanessa's
computers
not
before
here.
they're aware, so.
Just skip to the
Right.
Okay, well, it's 7 o'clock. I'll call this meeting to order of the Transportation Advisory Committee, September 20th, 2016. Lisa, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Batty?
Here.
Mr. David?
Present.
Mr. LaSalle?
Here?
Mr. McEnroe?
Here?
Mr. Jessic? Looks like he's not here. Mr. Mahoney?
Here.
And then both Mr. Anderson and Mr. Johnson let me know that they'd be absent tonight.
Okay, approval of the minutes of June 21st, 2016. Does anybody have any changes or amendments or corrections to those minutes? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Approved. Agenda analysis. Does anybody have any changes or additions to the agenda they'd like to make? Hearing none, we'll go forward with that as it's printed. Citizen comments. Do we have any citizen comments?
These are both Vanessa's with TriMet and Carl's with DKS.
Oh, okay.
So these are our speakers.
Great. Okay, then item 5, new business discussion items, presentation by Vanessa, is it Visser? Visar, okay, I always pronounce people's names correctly, because mine has been kind of torn apart a time or two.
Mine's no picnic either.
Yeah.
Vanessa, you can actually change slides with this. And that red one's a pointer. But if you point at the screen, they won't see it because they're seeing it on the monitors here.
They won't see
They would have to turn around.
Thank you.
Do you have handouts? Beyond what
Oh, my God.
we're handing out some things.
Right,
too.
that should be the report.
You guys get fancier by the day.
So lots of paper tonight,
Thank you.
which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but we try not to do it too
Turn you
often.
Yeah, push it to the right. Oop. It'll come up. No?
Yeah, it'll take
To
a
the left.
second and it'll pop up.
Yeah, okay.
There you go.
Yeah, okay, my normal seat, I don't have that switch.
Oh, right,
I had to
okay.
push mine to the right, that's weird.
I know they're
Yeah, I
on
put my
different sides
switches.
depending on which.
Hmm?
I
trying to
don't
push
know
my
what
buttons.
university.
So,
I tried my best.
Yeah, I
Tracks
know.
the copy of the matrix for you. Some matrix
Oh.
that goes along with it. Thank you, John.
all right, Vanessa, you're on.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Oh.
push it up like this, Vanessa. So it's, there you go.
Like that? Okay. So thank you for having me today. I am Vanessa Vassar with TriMet's Planning and Policy Department, and I'm here to talk about helping us prioritize bus service improvements that would serve Oregon City and the rest of our district. Over the past few years, TriMet's been range bus service planning effort to identify what bus service improvements we can make throughout our district. So our district includes Clackamas County, Washington County, and Multnomah County, and this is just a kind of a map depicting what our region looks like. And but I wanted to zoom in on the Southeast Service Enhancement Plan area. That's one of the 5 long-range bus service plans that we're doing throughout our district, and that's where most of Oregon City falls within. So you have a map, I guess, in front of you, but also in this handout that looks like this in the cover, in case you want to look more closely. But basically, this is a map of the area of Clackamas County that TriMet serves. And it's not what our service looks like today entirely. There's a lot of additions on here and identified improvements based on what we've learned from community members and understanding of where growth will occur in the future. So based on what we've learned, we've identified new routes throughout Clackamas County, just improving existing service that's there today, and then also the 2 areas where there's kind of a yellow blob. Those are areas that will require further research, but we think those are areas that qualify for shuttle service, potential shuttle service, based on maybe the need in that area, which I can go into detail a little bit more later. But so just zooming in from that, the Clackamas County bus service map to the bus service within Oregon City, I just wanted to highlight a couple of the improvements that we identified in the plan. In one, does anyone here ride transit? Or is familiar with the transit in Oregon City a little bit? Yeah. So there are a few lines that we've identified that could be improved significantly from what they are today in Oregon City. And one is the line 32, which is that red line that you see going from the Clackamas Community College in South Oregon City to Milwaukee. And we've identified that that's a route that exists today, and we've heard the need to increase frequency in that route, and also to add Sunday service, which doesn't exist today. Another improvement we've identified within Oregon City is the line 79, which goes into the Clackamas, the Oregon City Transit Center, all the way to the Clackamas Transit Center. So this line exists today. However, we're proposing a route change to this line so it can be more streamlined and faster, provide faster connections to folks that want to get to Oregon City. And then just to highlight a couple others, we're proposing 2 new lines that would impact Oregon City, and that's the line W and X. Line X would be coming from Happy Valley to Oregon City, and then line W would be coming from Clackamas Town Center. And then lastly, there's the line 35, which exists today. It's on the west side of the river, and that goes into Oregon City and all the way into downtown Portland. So those are just some highlights of what lines are in Oregon City today, and the lines that we think could use some improvements. So based on, this is a vision of what bus service could look like, but to implement it, it's going to depend on our budget each year. And each year, TriMet goes through an annual service planning process where we look at what service improvements we could make based on our bus availability and our budget. So this next slide is just, and you also should have a handout of this, but it's just kind of a flow chart of what that process looks like annually. But basically, we start in the fall, and so right now we're starting to draft up the first proposal that will go out to the public, and that will indicate which bus lines or service improvements we think we could make the following year. So it's a year-long process. So now we're starting in the fall, but the service would be implemented the following fall. And I guess I just wanted to highlight this process because this is the time where we could begin to implement some of the improvements we've identified in the service enhancement plans that are within Oregon City. So hopefully today I can get a better understanding of what those priorities might be, so that we can consider them in our process moving forward this next year. I just wanted to highlight a few things related to this year-long planning effort to put service on the ground. Again, it's a year-long process that begins each fall, and that will put out service the following fall and the following spring. And these ideally would be incremental changes to eventually get to what this vision looks like. So we would make improvements gradually over time to hopefully get to this long-term vision. However, it's entirely based on our budget, and we have about $4.3 million of new revenue to put towards new service over the next 10 years. And so that will help us get closer to this vision of new bus service. But it's also going to go towards the operations of a couple of high-capacity transit projects, the Powell Division Transit Development Project in Portland and Gresham, and then the Red Line extension to Hillsborough. So we have some money to work with. It's not enough to cover all the need out there right now. So again, I think it'll be really helpful to understand what your priorities are so we can really focus on those first. And then these are just some guidelines that we follow when we're looking at making bus service improvements. And we're taking these guidelines and applying them to some of the service improvements that we identified in this long-range vision. So we found ways that we could measure how the improvement performed. So we're looking at how well some of these new improvements would meet the ridership demand that's out there today, and then projected ridership in the future. We look at where growth is occurring today, and also within the future we look at some equity needs, among other guidelines up there. And one is also looking at our, in order to put service on the ground, we have some operation needs, so we need certain labor space so operators can take their break. And also right now we're limited on what new buses we have available to put new service out. So it takes a couple years to order buses, so we're in the process right now. So it limits us as to what time of the day we might be able to put new service out. And so based on these guidelines, this is what this spreadsheet, it relates to the spreadsheet. It's a little overwhelming, but this spreadsheet takes the improvements from this long-range plan, and we measure them using the guidelines that I just went over, and you can see how these improvements performed. So I'll just highlight one so you can understand what you're looking at. But so starting with the line 32, which I mentioned earlier, the proposal that we identified in this long-range plan is to increase frequency and add Sunday service. So this would be going from the transit center to the community college. And we've identified what days of the week it would operate, new days it would operate, and at what frequency. And just moving over to kind of the pink columns, this breaks down what the ridership is, what it was in the spring of 2015 before the Orange Line opened, what it is today, and then what we're projecting the ridership will be when we make this service improvement. So looking at the line 32, in spring of 2015, there were about 950 riders a day, and on weekdays, on weekdays, and that dropped a little bit going into right now. It dropped since last year, and then but we're thinking that with these new improvements, we could add an additional 920 riders a day to that number. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I think I have made an error. And then we also, I outlined the equity score and then how many jobs are within a quarter mile of that line. But the darker the pink, the the better the line performed. So this is just kind of to give you a sense of what the line looks like today and what it could be in the future. If you want to use these to help you identify priorities for Oregon City. Does that make sense?
Can you explain why there was such a drop between spring of 2015 and spring of 2016?
So I did some asking around to get a better understanding of why that did fall, and our ridership has dropped throughout the entire district, not just on the lines you're looking at. And one reason could be because of the fuel prices. A lot more people may be driving right now and taking transit.
Can you explain why there's two columns labeled projected
I know.
additional?
I just realized that. I think I mislabeled one of them, but I would look at the first column of projected additional ridership.
Okay.
Yeah, I apologize.
So what,
Just ignore
what
that
is
other
the second
column. I'm gonna have
meant
to-
to represent?
What was that?
I say, what is the second column meant to represent then?
I have to go back and look because I don't know why I changed the heading. It could be vehicle hours. It could be, you know what? I think it's the number of riders per vehicle hour. But I'll have to go back and look. I apologize, and then I can let you know for sure,
All right.
so you know what you're looking at. So that's just kind of a summary of what the improvements look like in Oregon City. And something that I didn't include in the spreadsheet were these community job connectors and the areas where we've identified potential shuttle service. And I pulled that aside because it's in a kind of its own application process and funding process right now. The way these have been operated in the past, which there's some examples on your screen. There's the North Hillsborough Link is an example of one that serves a shuttle that serves the employment area. And these typically can adapt to the need in the area, so it could adjust to major employer shift times, or maybe when residents feel that there's a higher demand to get service. So, but when the time comes and there's funding available, TriMet would be able to pass through federal funds to an institution, so maybe a chamber, to help go through a third operator. So I'm sorry, the chamber would help kind of organize and work with TriMet to identify what the need is in the neighborhood, and then we would go through a third operator to actually operate the system, because it's a lot more affordable to go through a third operator right now than it is through TriMet, specifically in these areas where there might not be as much ridership demand, but there's still a need there. So we're in the process of figuring out what this new timeline is going to be. In the past, it's been funded by JARC, which is a federal funding source, but that funding has gone away. We've identified some potential new funding, so we're in the process of figuring out what that new timeline is going to be, and once that's known, I can let you all know. So
Service always depends on funding, though, doesn't it? I mean, without the money, you're just not gonna give service to that line. And when the funding goes away, you have to be flexible enough to whether or not there's gonna be more funding in that area or not.
yeah, so we did have to make cuts during the recession because the funding went down, but we spread it around and try not to eliminate entire lines, but just maybe reduce frequency. But hopefully we won't have to go through that anytime soon.
The public outreach phase, how is that done?
Through the annual service plan that we do every year.
Yeah.
So Based on the priorities we hear from you all and others throughout the region, we'll put out a draft proposal, and it's going to go. We try to reach as many residents and riders as possible. One avenue is going directly to riders and talking to them on buses, and going to transit centers and asking them how the change might impact them, if it's a benefit, or if not, what's the issue, I guess. We'll also do some online outreach, but we're open to suggestions to try to meet as many people as possible.
I would suggest perhaps you try to contact the neighborhood associations.
Mhm.
Then you might get to some people that are not transit riders.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you.
And also, you made improvements to the Holcomb Boulevard route in the last year.
Mhm.
I'd be curious how you decided to increase the routes, the number of routes.
Specific to the Holcomb area?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was based on the need in the area. We know that there's a lot of demand, and some people in that along that stretch are dependent on transit, so we try to meet some of those needs.
Yeah,
It seems like
those
it's been
people
well
up there
received.
are ecstatic
Yeah, I've heard that. That's
about
great.
the increases of the
Yeah.
routes. That's great. Do you have any plans about possibly adding routes again to South End Road and or Central Point Road?
So South End, I believe, falls within that yellow area. Is that correct?
Yes.
And
it
Central
does.
Point as well?
Yes, and Central Point as well. Yeah.
So this is our way of saying that we do think there's a need for service in that area, and we want to work with you all to understand how that it's going to develop and where the need's going to be before we determine the exact routing.
Okay,
So-
so you are recognizing it as a needed?
Yes.
Yep, okay.
Mhm.
That's all the questions I had. Anybody else?
I have a question, and it's, and I know the answer, but I'm gonna put it out there anyway.
Okay.
We are seeing more of a need to get a express service over to Tualatin and Tigard area without having to go through Portland
Mhm.
or Lake Oswego. And whilst I understand the budgeting thing and the fact that you'd have to have new buses, new whatever, I'd still like to see that being addressed as being a new thing that needs to be looked at,
Yes.
connecting the regional centers.
Mhm. We have heard that, and what you can't really see on this map is another area, a yellow area, basically indicating that we think that would be a good candidate for shuttle service
Mhm.
until we know what the demand will be. So that is one of the areas that would benefit Oregon City, but again, understanding the funding constraints, it would be helpful to know what the top priorities are that we should start focusing on now.
I would not put that over the improvements to the existing lines,
Okay.
but I would say that we need that connection.
Okay, that's helpful to know. So it sounds like your preference is to put service towards existing lines.
We have people from the Holcomb area that go over to the hospital in Tualatin. We have people who have jobs in Tualatin and in Tigard, and the only way to get there in a good amount of time is on the freeway.
Mhm.
And that's not necessarily the best way.
No. Okay.
What happened at one point, Simon was talking about, running the light rail from Clackamas into Oregon City and connecting to that line.
Yeah, I think I wasn't involved with that process, but I know there were some concerns with extending that all the way to Oregon City from the county. But I think it could be revisited in the future. It's still part of the kind of Metro's long-range vision of the region. Is that an interest to you all?
I was curious. I mean, it seems like you have these two lines that could
Yeah.
serve rapidly people in town. But
One more cost-effective approach that Metro and TriMet have been doing lately is looking at bus rapid transit, which is basically a light rail on wheels. So that could be another option to connect folks to those services instead of doing a whole new light rail.
So, Senator, maybe I can answer that. So it's still in the regional plan for the Max Line extensions, both the Clackamas Town Center route and the Milwaukee route. I think the vote against rail in Clackamas County has essentially pointed the region and definitely TriMet at other areas where there's more interest in seeing rail planning for rail to continue. So anyway, that's kind of the status, but it's still in a plan. It's still something that we're going to continue to raise as we start talking about regional the regional transportation system plan and updates to that. But it just kind of hit a stall, I think, mostly because of Clackamas County voters spoke and said they weren't that interested in seeing transit continue or rail continue. These high-capacity buses seem like, given the obstacles to, especially the Milwaukee line, they might be a better alternative. So that's kind of the storyline that I've heard. And then I just want to mention, so on the spreadsheet here, I just want to make sure line 35 is listed, but is that line 33? Is that line 33 data? Can I?
No, it's actually line 35 because the line 33 just went through a round of improvements, so we didn't include that, and it's performing pretty well, so it's not part of the long-range vision right now to make any changes to that.
Okay.
So it actually is the line 35, mostly because the line 35 goes into the transit center and then up to Portland.
So
if you think it would be helpful, I could add, provide information about the line 33, though.
Line 35 just isn't enumerated here on the bus service map.
Or on the bus.
One.
Right.
Yeah, and I apologize. It falls within another service enhancement plan area, and I do have the map for that. If you want, it's a separate map.
Oh, okay.
We're working on getting one consolidated map of all the improvements.
So
in the
where
area.
does bus 30? What's the bus 35 route?
So it goes.
I mean, I don't need specifics. Just where does it go?
It goes to downtown Portland.
Okay. And it stops at our transit center.
Yes.
Okay.
And hits Lake Oswego.
Oh, so it is shown on this map. It's just.
Yeah, it's kind of shaded out.
Yeah, it's just shadowed out, and it
Yeah.
doesn't show up in the future plan.
No, but I have
Okay.
the other
Okay.
map if that's helpful. But ideally, we'll come up with one map and we can just share it with you all, so it's not so confusing.
And I guess the other thing that I mentioned is we're starting to talk a little bit about city commission goals, and I think under enhance the livability of the community, goal 3, there was a goal that was pretty general, but to work with TriMet to enhance transit service in Oregon City. And so we feel like we've done that. We've accomplished a lot of the improvements to transit in the Holcomb area, the bus line 33, some of the other improvements that have happened with 79. So today's discussion was have we met that goal? Well, we didn't really articulate what met the goal, but we've seen a lot of improvements. There's still room for improvement with some of these commuter jobs connector shuttles, but I feel like we're on a path through this that it no longer necessarily has to be a commission goal to work on for a 2-year goal to get more enhanced bus service or transit service in Oregon City. But that's a discussion that the commission's going to have. So any thoughts you have on that would be good. And then I guess the other thing was, it looks like, Vanessa, I mean, out of these 5 lines that you've listed in this, are you asking us to prioritize those?
So I am, however, I know that's can be challenging. We're asking this of jurisdictions throughout our entire district, and I'll also be going to the Clackamas County TAC meeting to see if maybe we can get to a consensus over what some of the top priorities are. So if you have any, if you have an understanding for what the top priorities are in Oregon City, that would be helpful. You don't necessarily have to rank all of these, but something that I could take back and really advocate for you all would be really helpful.
I could certainly stand for improvements to line 32.
Mm-hmm. What kind?
That's the other main line that runs through town.
Yeah, and we actually we've begun to make some improvements this past year, and some went towards the line 32, and we received a lot of positive feedback. Normally it's we hear from people who are concerned, so it was really refreshing to see how many people appreciated improving that line.
In terms of livability, I do have a question that wasn't addressed here, and it might be outside of what you're discussing, but what is the current thinking on using shelters at the more frequently used stops?
So I'll try to answer that as best I can, but we know there's a high need for more comfortable arrangements at some of the bus stops, and our bus stops department often they have a small budget to work with, and they base it on what the ridership is at that actual stop. So if you meet a certain threshold of riders per day, then you could qualify for a shelter. But if there are areas that aren't receiving what you think is needed, it would be helpful to know, and I could bring that back to folks. Is there a specific spot?
I was just trying to get a feel for the shelters I see. Look like they haven't been touched in a while.
Yeah.
And given some of the places I see people get on and off, it would be helpful to have some weather protection in the winter.
Yeah.
And I'm also wondering if there's a way to do a neighborhood buy-in kind of a program where if the neighborhood really wants to add a bus shelter someplace, they can work toward figuring out how to work with you guys to get it.
I think that's a good idea, especially because there's probably more need than money available right now.
Well, that's the way I see
So
it.
it'd be nice. I think what I'll do is, because that's not my wheelhouse, but I can definitely connect with folks at TriMet and get a better sense of how to proceed with this. It might be understanding what the ridership is. I think I provided you with that, but maybe looking at where the high ridership is and where maybe they could qualify for improvements that they haven't gotten so far. Maybe based on that, we could start working with neighborhoods.
And I got one for John more than for you, because about 40 years ago, the city garden...
It wasn't my fault.
Well, I know, I wasn't here either. The city garden people, Garden Club, put nice benches in at various bus stops. And the wood that they used is, charitably saying, going away. And the one by my house, last spring, somebody took one of the seat planks up and laid it up by my house. It was 3/4 rotten. Is there some way to either take it out or get it upgraded to where it might be safe to use?
Is it a stop on Fifth? I haven't.
That's Fifth and Morris and Monroe.
Replacement of benches. We can look at it.
Yeah, I don't know whose responsibility it would be now, because I'm pretty sure the city didn't put it in to begin with. And I'm pretty sure TriMet didn't do it.
No, it doesn't sound like a TriMet bench.
Well, there's a bunch
But
of new benches on Holcomb Boulevard too. I don't know where they came from. But I know one of them at the curve at Holcomb up there has been run into so many times, they haven't replaced it. They don't.
Don't want to get hit.
Yeah, but that's a good point. I don't know where those came from.
Are those wood as well?
Yes.
Oh.
Well, there was a brass plaque on the one by my house, and
Okay.
I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it says Oregon City Garden Club, about 1972.
Yes.
Given how important reliable information is and how to collect it in a timely manner, have you given any consideration to the use of these cell phones for an app by TriMet to record and verify ridership, its location, and demand for ridership? Because, I mean, you're talking now about a cell phone with GPS capabilities and immediate information in an environment that's always changing for you people. And if you could design an app that would communicate the need for ridership and what have you, and get it right from the source
Yes.
in a timely manner, it would seem to me like that would validate, routing and time and the number of buses and so on and so forth. Because, my goodness, you're living in an environment, you don't like the way things are going, wait 5 minutes, you know? And,
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There, we're about to get a whole bunch of new great data as we roll out the ski fair program. We're gonna change our ticket option to be mostly electronic. You can still buy an actual paper ticket, but we'll offer folks the option to have an app or put it on a card, put your fare in a card, and you'll just tap at, there'll be something to tap when you get on the bus. You might start noticing them now on the buses, but we'll have all that information available now to at least know when people are getting on, and we can make some assumptions about where they're traveling to. I don't know if it'll be quite as robust as what you're suggesting, but it'll be better than what we have today.
because your data can be outdated before you receive it,
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Henry,
Maybe-
TriMet does mine a lot of data. I mean, they extensively. I mean, the buses are tracked. The travel times are tracked. I mean, number of people getting on and off.
Yep.
They have a pretty extensive data sets.
Yep.
My idea of, my response or my reaction to mass transit is throw money at it. Really, I think that's the general consensus of the voters, just,
That's good.
that and buy a new fire truck. That's my reaction to it.
Okay.
I'm being facetious.
Yeah.
But,
Well, I appreciate that.
Anybody else have any questions, comments?
just,
Thank you very
Hen-
much, Vanessa. That was
Thanks,
good
Vanessa.
information.
Thank you.
Henry, Martin just pulled up the Google map, and I think I've driven by that bench probably, I don't know, 1,000 times. I never even have seen that bench before. And it is right there in black and white. So Martin thinks we can. Well, for one, does the garden club still exist? And
I doubt it.
and I guess the other thing would be, if not, we could probably, we could look to some solution there, because it looks pretty beat up.
And that could be a potential liability, I would think, if it's as rotten as.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah,
sure
they
whose
could-
liability it is, but
We
yeah,
can switch it over to,
somebody's-
the responsibility over to TriMet.
yeah, that may be. Try me. You guys do, but you put benches out.
Again, it's based on the demand, but that sounds like, is it downtown?
It's on Fifth, so it's a heavy, frequent stop.
It'd be worth looking at what the ons and off are there, and I could make the case.
It's actually one of the more used stops.
Yeah.
They get off and go to the Midway Tavern.
Well, I can follow up with you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next presentation by our old friend Carl Springer with DKS Associates.
So, Carl was kind enough to come on last minute notice, so appreciate that. First of all, we didn't have a chance to go through this, so I thought we've created some slides just to give you a little bit of an update of kind of a preview, if you will, of where we're going with the transportation system, our project list, and kind of an update of the SDC. As you may or may not recall, we did some SDC community forums to talk about our SDCs and some of the business community's concern about our SDC impacts on new development of new non-residential developments. So we started that effort. It's been over a year now, and we started looking harder at our transportation project list and kind of maybe adding projects to that project list. And as we delved into that more and more, we started realizing that we needed some help in doing that. So DKS, Carl and his group, they did the original, they did the last project list, right? The 2012.
I mean, I think the one in 2000, which,
12, yeah, the TSP. I don't know if you did the 2009 list. I never really, I'm not sure.
We did. I think we did. I mean, we did it with FCS group, but I think the 2009 list was based on the prior project list, right?
So when we adopted the transportation system plan, we didn't make any adjustments to our SDC. I mean, our intent was to not increase our transportation SDC over and above what it already was, because it was and still is pretty high in the region for transportation SDC. So right now we're just kind of gathering data. We're working with DKS. We're going to work with John Gillarducci with the FCS group, who does most of our SDC updates and analysis. And so we just kind of want to give you a preview, because this is one of your goals, to be quite honest with you, is to take a look at the transportation list and the transportation plan every 5 years. So that's the way the bylaws read. That's one of your main kind of jobs, I guess, as the transportation transportation advisory committee.
John, read this and understand it verbatim. Is that what you're talking about?
Did we give them a copy of the list? Is that what that is?
That's the list data.
A lot of numbers here.
There's a lot of numbers there, and so we're not expecting you to study that or really even comment on that. We just kind of wanted to show you it's a pretty long list, and so we're going to go through that. I'm going to talk mostly about the slides, and then Carl's going to interject kind of the process that they're going through to update the list.
So,
And
so you guys also updating SDC fees?
we need to talk about that. That's part of the analysis. As we look at the SDCs, is there adjustments that are needed? So that's what FCS group will help us with.
John,
Yes.
are these estimated project costs, what year dollars are they?
Current year.
Current year, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And again, Carl can touch on those details, but so just to let you know, we have the current project list that was just adopted in 2009. We adopted the transportation system plan, but since we didn't go through an SDC update at that time, officially, I don't feel like we actually adopted a new project list. Obviously, in 2013, we adopted the TSP, which didn't, and so that's kind of a repeat, didn't include an update to the SDC. And then based on a variety of needs, we're looking at it in 2016. This is mostly driven by really community input. I mentioned the community SDC forums and the frustration with some of the amount of our SDCs. But there's been some other things, like we did the Lynn Avenue corridor plan. You folks all looked at that and I think made motions for approval. We've got the concept plans and those projects that are out there. So we're just trying to we wanted to amend that list. And really, if you remember, there was a funded and unfunded list in the TSP. Part of my objective was to just continue adding those projects that were unfunded onto the funded list, so that would give us a little more flexibility on how we could spend SDC. So if a development came that maybe wasn't on the funded list, but yet it was SDC qualifying, maybe there was a way for us to just have that on the list, so it would be, it would just give us a little bit more flexibility on how to spend those funds. So some of those are the reasons why we're not proposing to change our methodology. So you'll learn more about our methodology, but it's pretty much, you got a certain number of projects and you got a certain number of estimated trips that will be that will come to Oregon City as growth progresses. So you know, you take your project list and your number of trips, and that's what comes up with your unit rate for SDCs. And that's a real basic explanation. Again, John Ghilarducci, we'll schedule to have him in front of you to give you more information on that, but just trying to give you a little bit of a preview. The SDC methodology includes a reimbursement component, so there's a look back that looks at projects that have already been built. There's the improvement fee, which is mostly related to the list that you have in front of you and that Carl's going to talk about. And then there's a small component for what they call administrative cost recovery. So, for instance, the cost to update the list, we're gonna charge that to the SDCs. So the DKS contract, the work that John Ghilarducci is doing for us through the FCS group is gonna be one of those administrative cost fees that would qualify for us to spend SDC revenues on that.
John, is any of this computerized? How do you guys keep track of this stuff?
You mean the list? Well, that list, there's a detailed spreadsheet that, I don't know if you have it to bring up, but we could bring it up and just kind of scroll through it. But, yeah, I mean, most of all the estimates, those are all automated. So maybe it'd be good for you to, start, Carl, and just kind of see where you can take this conversation.
Well, let's see. So, want me to cover this line?
Well, let's see. These are the things that we're basically, you're going to be updating, or you've updated the cost of these projects, and you've also updated the peak hour growth.
Yeah. So one comment about the cost piece. I mean, back when we were doing the TSP itself, we did kind of what we normally do for making estimates for each of those projects, but shortly after we finished the TSP update, Metro, our friends at Metro, handed out kind of a template of the way they wanted to do cost estimates for every city in the region. That was after we were done. And so what that made us do is do a little more comprehensive estimate than we had done as a part of the TSP update, and had better unit cost prices in it than what we had. So when we went back recently and updated all those projects, some of the projects went up quite a bit. So in total, they went up quite a bit compared to what you're familiar with back in the TSP, which is a thing we struggle with all the time, because when you're doing kind of sketch level planning and a long range plan like that, a lot of times as it moves down the process of actually being developed and designed into a real project, the cost goes up, and people who don't know any better look at that and they go, oh, you know, what's going on, everything's wrong. But the fact of the matter is, you learn a lot as you progress down that process of what's there and what's not there, how much property you really own and how much you really don't. All those things, the cost always goes up, it never goes down. So that was probably the biggest change between the numbers you're familiar with from the TSP and what you're looking at on that list today. And that obviously translates to IRV right away. I mean, that's the numerator in the math. It's the cost.
And then the growth, is that what you were talking about? The peak hour for?
Yeah, the peak hour growth, we go back and look at the travel forecast. And again, we're just looking at the increment associated with growth. Not what's on the road today, but how much it'll change as growth occurs. So it's kind of the increment between the volume you have on the facilities today and what you expect out in the horizon year. And that's the increment that gets applied toward these kind of calculations. We do that for all the roadway projects, but we also do something similar to that for the ped and bike projects as well. Even though we can't discretely estimate how many people are going to ride their bikes and how many people are going to walk, it's kind of a proxy for that. Hopefully next time the city does a TSP update, the models will be smarter. They'll be able to actually forecast ped and bike trips, but we're not there yet. So I see there's a piece in there about the ped and bike share. I think we used the same ratio that we had from the last time the update was done. I think it was 12% was the magic number.
Right.
And it looks like there's some thinking about maybe updating that.
So the the bike pedestrian is a little ambiguous, right? We use just a percentage.
We did.
And we've asked Metro if they can help us update that number to find out if it's higher or lower. And so that's something that's forthcoming yet to happen.
What other cities with a similar size are using for that?
That's what we're asking them right now. We're asking them for that information. So we're gonna bring that back to you at our next meeting, because so far they said they can help us with this and they can get us an updated number, but I don't know. Have you used anything different in other
Well,
jurisdictions?
I think for a city like yours, it's kind of set away from the center. It's probably a reasonable range. I mean, I think that's a daily number, if I remember right. It's not a commute number. It's for all trips during the day, kind of a thing. So it should be, because that's the way the Metro model is set up. It's based on your travel activity for the entire day.
So are you guys feeding information in the Metro's model, or you have a separate model?
We use Metro's model to do the plan to do the TSP update. That's the information that we use to do that forecast. So we go back through this process and kind of query that model and say, in this corridor, how much of the traffic is going to be related to growth? It's usually somewhere in the 30 to 50% range, and unless it's on the very fringe where it's actually brand new growth, and so much higher, could be a much higher percentage.
I wonder, do you have the spreadsheet up that you can pull up? Okay. So anyway, the main ones that are kind of in that have essentially been accomplished is the two kind of bolder sections. The others are in process, and we'll bring that back to you. But we wanted to give you an update. It's kind of, the timing of this isn't a long timeline, so we wanted to get it in front of you. This meeting will probably bring the balance of the information back to you next meeting. The actual adoption of a new SDC rate would be, there's actually public noticing requirements, so I think there's a 90-day noticing requirement, so we expect to see City Commission. I think I've got a schedule in here for that, and so I'll go over that, but it'd be after the first of the year for actual adoption of a.
So your grand total driving project cost is like $260 million, and then the SDC creditable is 166, something like that. At least that's what it says here at the bottom.
Yeah, I think so. That's what I want to. Are you finding that?
You want them to see it up here, or you just want to?
Yeah, I was. So you have. I guess you have the list in front of you, Carl. You don't, but
I don't.
I'm going to give you that. Can I get another copy of it?
Do you want me to take this off and put up that?
This is fine. Okay. So, this is several pages, first of all, of projects. And Carl, can you talk through the different kinds of projects, and then maybe what the different columns for estimated versus and non-growth growth?
I'll explain the table a little bit. So first column is the number. We have each project that's on the list has a separate number designation, and there's a secret code here that I see that we use. So under the project numbering, if it starts with a D, that's a driving project, also known as a roadway project. On the next page, I think so the D's go for 2 pages, the front and back of page 1, and then it goes to the W's, and those are the walking projects. So those would be sidewalks, ped crossings, anything specific to just walking. Not to say that the road projects don't have sidewalks in them, they do have sidewalks in them, but these are more along the lines of standalone, walking projects.
And it potentially, there might be a small amount of street thrown in with a walking project.
Stormwater?
Well, storm or
Oh,
water.
I see.
Yeah,
So if you have a shoulder in a ditch,
widening
you
to
gotta
get
put in storm
the alignment
drains.
correct.
You're right, yeah, that's built into the cost. I don't think we called it. I didn't know, we didn't, that's part, yeah, you're right, if that's the improvement in there, that would be, built in and part of the cost.
Would, excuse me, Carl,
Jonathan, you had a question?
would federal dollars be part of, broken out on, by projects? Because if it's a federally funded, that would increase the cost significantly, or it could.
Yeah, I don't know how many of these are expected to be.
Funding,
Funded that
other
way.
than, these are average numbers that we're talking about here in terms of unit prices. So,
Okay.
there's nothing in here that says 20% of these are gonna be federally funded, so our average, but they're just kinda regionally average unit costs for asphalt, for sidewalk,
Gotcha.
for those kind of things, so. You're right, if they were all federally funded, we'd better, increase our
Triple your cost.
contingencies a little bit.
So keeping up with the discussion, we got driving, walking, and then a few pages after that, we've got bike. And the last one, I believe, well, we got several more. S would be safety.
No, shared use, I think.
Oh, shared use, yeah. C's we're getting toward the end there. C's are crossings. So as a part of the TSP update, we consider not only where there's missing gaps in the sidewalks on key roads, but also where along at intersections or on arterials, you really need more help getting across. If there's not a traffic signal nearby with an activated peg crossing, sometimes there's other improvements that can be made to help you get across the road safely, and that's what the C projects are, crossing projects. And let's see, FF.
Family friendly.
Oh yes, it was a kind of a reduced version of a bike route. And just as an overall statement, several of you were involved in the TSP update, and one of the big shifts that the city made through that process was to steer a lot more interest and focus and dollars to ped, bike, and walking projects than you had in the plan previously. It was a pretty sharp change. It was from, I think we added up the dollars in the prior plan, it was something like 6 or 5% or something like that for ped and bike projects. And in the new plan, it was more like 25%. So it was a much higher portion. That's partly why the fee, you'll see later, the fee for ped and bike goes way up, is because there's a lot more projects in there for ped and bike. So back to explaining. So that's the category on the left, project description. Our best estimate of the cost, the growth shares, we get those off of the travel forecasting data, and you can see in the next column, city responsibility, 100%. And so some of these projects really don't qualify for STC funding.
But hold on the first line, for example, you have $1.5 million. It says non-growth is 75%, growth is 25%, city responsibility 100%. But then you're saying that it's a STC eligible cost of $391.
Right. That's because the growth share is 25%.
Why is the city's responsibility 100%?
So the city responsibility column, Carl, you may remember was more, is it a state facility or is it somebody else's facility? So for that first one, there's Malala Avenue
forgot
and
about
Beaver
that one.
Creek Road is all city. There's no other agencies that we can reach out to and help, fund that or look to fund that. Whereas
Right, yeah, I
you go
forgot what that
down a
was.
little further in 213, 7th Street, Washington Street corridor, and that one's 30% city responsibility. So the idea would be the other 70% would come by way of state or county funds.
Right. And that.
Oh, and then out of that 100%, whatever $390,000, whatever that percentage is
Right.
of the cost is SDC.
Right.
Eligible.
eligible.
Yeah.
So that's a little,
So
that's a little bit confusing.
So the obvious, yeah, so that's right, John, I misremembered what that column was about, but, so the key issue here, if you haven't picked up on it yet, is the difference between the total estimated cost and the eligible cost. Somebody else is paying for that, other than growth. So, in most, every case, the SDC share is some portion of the total project cost. It's a challenge to try to find matching funds to put that all together.
The other thing, that total estimated cost, I don't remember the details. I don't know if you will either, Carl, but worked up. There's contingencies built into each of these. So to your question about federally funded projects, I don't remember what the contingencies were, but there's contingencies for design and contingencies for construction. And
Yeah, this is the full meal deal from design to actually getting it on the ground. That's in these that's been assumed. So
Is this in the present dollars or future dollars?
this is present dollars, 2016 dollars.
Okay.
so, so that SDC eligible cost, that's just for the driving solution, is the 166 million and change, right? That's the
Biggest one.
Yeah, that's by far the biggest one, and you know, the challenge that we're coming up with is when we went through the TSP, we had a community that was well, a lot of those projects were pre-existing. We brought them forward. A lot of those projects were you know, raised by the community as saying we need these projects. Most of those were more about walking solutions and biking solutions than they probably were about driving solutions. But we went through kind of this extensive list, and if you remember the maps for there's maps for each one of these different lists as well. And so lots of times, you know, we all do it. And I say the community because staff do it too. You're oh, that's a needed project. Let's get it on the list. That's an important project. Let's get it on the list. Without a lot of regard for where the bottom line of the dollar amount's going to land. And then you look at the growth component, how many trips are we is going to be built out, and that's what sets your actual, you know, unit rate for your transportation SDCs, and in this case it's pretty high. Yeah. And so when we hear from others in the community that feel like it's too high maybe, then you got to figure out, well, as long as we can reduce that. Some agencies have, you know, just said we're not going to, well, you've heard of some agencies during the downturn that said we're not going to charge SDCs, right? And others that say we're going to charge 50% or, you know, something like that. And I think that's the conversation that's coming, Senator. So when we have more accurate detail, not necessarily in these project estimates, but in kind of some of the other numbers that we're talking about with the growth rate for bikes and pedestrians and those kind of things, and we want all that to go into that rate analysis and see what those numbers look like. And one thing, if we're interested in seeing development happen in the community, these SDCs can prevent that development from happening, but they're also a responsible tool to fund those things. So trying to have that conversation with our policymakers about, well, you know, maybe our contingencies, maybe they don't want, maybe they think that we shouldn't have such high contingencies. What we've kind of heard through our forum group is they don't necessarily think reducing or manipulating the project list makes sense. They will like the idea of staff having the flexibility to be able to, you know, invest in a project when a project comes up or when it makes sense to do so based on some other development. So keep the flexibility of the project list, but you know, find another way to reduce that, and maybe contingencies is one good way of doing it. In theory, you might not ever collect what you need. Like Carl said, these project costs never seem to go down. They always only seem to go up. So I don't know the magic there, other than there's a balance between what development can afford to pay and, you know, what our needs are. And so that's kind of good.
Yeah, I would add one thing. I I would suggest, and maybe John Ghilarducci's tapped into this, but might be worthwhile kind of resurveying the surrounding communities and see where their fees are at, because I don't think any of them are going down at this point. I know we're in the
Well,
process.
fees are not going down, but I think as long as they're, I mean, if they're based on, I mean, on a cost, right? And
They are.
I think everybody is okay paying their fair share. What can happen is if you're looking Happy Valley versus Oregon City, and when developers are looking SDCs and they're looking the land, they're saying, okay, when I pull that permit, it's gonna cost me $10,000 more in Oregon City than Happy Valley, so they're inclined to go.
Well, that's what I'm
build
saying.
over there.
You should relook at that, because I know Happy Valley is now going to do their own SDCs.
I was just using them as a.
I'm just saying, I think there won't be, they'll be pretty even, is what I'm thinking, because that's what agencies tend to do. They tend to compete with their neighbors on the fees, so they aren't forcing.
Well, not
one way
quite
or the other.
necessary. If you look, for example, what the SDC fees are for the Gresham expansion, they're like $70,000 a house. That includes all of the transportation, parks, and everything.
Oh, yeah, when you put it all together.
So you're
for sure.
you're looking huge numbers versus like, Hillsborough, much lower number for the South
Right.
Hillsborough. So, those are based on the cost to develop the area, and
Yeah.
they are what they are.
Right.
There is a tendency to want to compare, but yet
You can.
it's hard to, because Oregon City's an old city. You compare that to Tualatin, for instance, might be a big difference. So anyway, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, other than I really kind of wanted you to know that we were doing this work, that we're going to bring that for you. I no way intended for you to look at the details of each individual cost estimate or anything like that. It's really just kind of understanding it and making sure that, when we start talking about methodologies, that, you understand that, so you can answer those questions and you can provide guidance where it makes sense.
I appreciate the job they did on the analysis and showing us how they came up with the numbers. It might be nice, though, to have one more chart showing what the end results would be for somebody, a developer coming in. You mentioned $70,000 for all the SDCs. Be nice to know we've done this analysis, but what's the end result? What does it mean to us as a group for doing a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, or a 50,000 square foot box? I need to kind of be able to grasp and wrap my brain around it, but just knowing what the analysis is showing, it's $1,500 per bike ped trip. That doesn't tell me anything. It doesn't tell me if I'm a developer, what's it gonna cost.
Okay.
So if I just had one more little chart saying, and here's the breakdown of what it means.
So let me see if this is the same chart that we've yet to get to. So this is just a map. This came out of our 2000 this is the 2016 project list. So it's got a few projects added to it, but this is pretty much very similar to what we had in the TSP. These kinds of maps. This one here happens to be for walking solutions. We have them for biking and driving as well. So what we hope to provide, and we've got some questions kind of in here because the work is not complete yet, but is a specific where you'll see the actual dollar amount. So for each of the each piece of the SDC, you'll see that, whether it be an improvement fee, whether it be for vehicles or for bike ped. So we're planning to fill that out. And is this what you're talking about? More of a detail about what the actual dollar amount
For
is?
instance, if I'm going to be putting in a 2-bedroom house, how many auto trips and how many bike trips, and how does that correlate into SDC fees that I have to pay if I'm a developer? What am I going to be charged for that 2-bedroom house? What does that equate to? Because you're generating this off trips.
Yeah.
So how many trips does my 2-bedroom house generate for autos and bike ped?
So that'll be fairly easy for us to show because it doesn't matter if it's 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom. If it's a single family home, you pay the same rate. But we do have a different for like multifamily. So if it's an apartment complex, What's the big difference that's hard for us to compare is the commercial and the different kinds of commercial, or not, anything non-residential, so,
But you guys have some commercial, I mean, shopping,
Typically,
yeah, we have lots of it, and so, but that's the one that's harder to compare or to give you. We can give you, here's the square footage, here's that specific kind of development, here's what it's going to cost if it's a restaurant versus a. But it, there's so
And
many
something-
variables in that particular calculation. It gets a little harder for us to share.
something like that could be just referred to the trip generation report.
Yep, it's all based on
It's all
trip
based-
generation.
And, there's a big, huge book for every type of business and
Yeah.
amount of square footage and type of cities and,
Well, I'm
Yeah.
sure when you come back, John will provide that, because he typically provides a sample of different land use types.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a big fat book
But
that,
the residential though is a straight fee, straight across the board.
Yep.
okay.
John, just for curiosity's sake, I'm curious as to what the sum total of the growth share cost and the non-growth share cost would be for the 166 mil. Just running through all the summation of all the percentages that you got here and dividing by the number of entries and seeing what the average.
You could do that on your own computer.
I could, but it'd be easier on
You
his
mean,
spreadsheet.
you mean there's the total cost estimate,
Mhm.
wanting to know what that is divided by what?
So
By-
that, well, sum up the growth, that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the sixth column over. It says growth cost share,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
and then just divide it by the number of entries.
So the average?
Yeah, just an average of cost share.
Oh, of a project cost?
Yeah,
Oh,
of how much our total project cost is
it's
associated
It's
with
just you
growth.
want the monetary value, not the average percentage.
Either
Right.
way,
It's just 166 divided by 261, right?
Yeah, because we got
So it's-
260.
You got the eligible, STT eligible cost is
Mhm.
166 million, and we got, the total cost is 261 million, so the growth is paying for that ratio,
about a third.
more than a third, it's about 2/3, right? Growth is paying for 2/3. My math in my head, right, 16 divided by 26, roughly around, I didn't get ballpark 2/3. So that's a big chunk, actually.
big chunk.
Most cities, it's more like half and half.
Mm-hmm.
So the growth pays half, and then the city's left to find the other half somewhere else.
That's our biggest challenge, is that finding it somewhere else piece, so.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
We hear a lot of complaints about the amount of an SDC
Mhm.
for different kinds of development. The problem, the other side of that is that there's this kind of, this other piece that the city has to find funding for, and we're recognizing that's, there's not always a mechanism, there's grants. Maybe if the county gas tax, is passed, we may have an opportunity to spend money on these projects, so, there's.
I'm curious, why did the peak hour trip number drop? Like from 2009 to proposed condition, like.
So I think it's got to do with the 7 years of difference, and so there was some growth, that happened over that 7 years. So I'm guessing that's got to do with it. I don't know, Carl, is there any?
But your peak hour trips are dropping from 23,448 to 21,449 by like 2,000 peak trips.
Right.
Right.
These
Well,
aren't
these aren't-
total, right?
Yeah, these are growth trips. So those numbers you're talking about the second row there, 23,448, 21,000.
Yeah, I mean under the improvement free,
That
both
was
peak
the projected growth in trips
Oh,
at
okay.
that point in time.
Right.
Oh, okay.
It's not total.
It's
peak
not
hour
total in
trips.
the system.
Oh, okay.
It's not like there's less people driving than there used to be. It's the growth ahead.
Okay, that's wasn't clear.
John, the letter, S is system, right? system development charges?
Yes.
How many systems we talking about? Cause this refers to transportation, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And how many different,
Sewer, water.
sewer, water, and all?
Sewer, water, parks,
Okay, and how do we determine how much,
storm. too.
a given, building permit will, pay for what system? How do you subdivide that?
So the similar analysis goes through for every one of those. So there's a capital list and there's a growth number associated with that. And a little different, I mean, this is based on peak hour trips, others might be based on,
Capacity.
yeah, the capacity of the system. So, you know, water might be gallons of use per unit. So each one of those has a methodology, and each one of those is calculated, you know, for the single-family residents, they're all the same, but commercial gets really complicated.
What is the current SDC fees for like single house?
I wanna say it's around $26,000
That's
total.
aggregate of everything.
Doesn't
No
the
building
building
permit.
official do that?
Yeah, they do, but we do the commercial so we actually calculate all of them even for the single family, and they have to be updated every year, right? So we give the building department what those SDCs would be for a building. But for commercial, they give us the details about the building, or the developer does, and we calculate those. We actually have again, the FCS group helped us with this, but we asked them to build a calculator because it's that complicated. It's got lookup tables that look to some of those documents that you're talking about, and I think it's pretty cool, but it's still complicated enough that we do it with the calculator and then we check it by hand, because it's confusing.
So you got all these transportation systems pretty well defined and outlined here in this document. How are we doing with parks, and how are we doing with sewers and other, categories that these SDCs will eventually fund?
I would say we're doing okay.
We have made the effort to define those?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we have, yeah. They're all prone to updates. We're doing the stormwater master plan right now, which is gonna end up with a project list and an SDC and rate recommendation for that as well.
Well, from a builder comes in and he says, okay, what am I paying for here? Where's my money going and why? Which is a legitimate question. So we've got an answer for all that in our priorities for growth and our methodology to fill these priorities and address these issues for growth in parks and
We can try. They don't always like the details of that, but yeah, we've got good answers for those.
okay, good. That's what I was asking, because I think it's a legitimate question by a developer, you know? Where's my money going and why? And show me the proof, you know?
So more to come on this topic. I just wanted to go through, we got to continue working with DKS and FCS group to get through this. We hope to bring it back to the TAC in the October meeting and have a commission work session on the 8th. So anything you can give us in terms of feedback, that'd be great. We've got a 90-day notice of the hearing, so we're thinking February or March of 2017 before we actually adopt an SDC.
If you want to develop something, now it's time.
Okay.
Now it's time to develop things before they change SDC.
Oh, yeah. If you got the money to develop something. It all boils down to this.
Yeah, STCs don't happen at annexation, they happen at the time of the building department, so at the time of the building permit, so.
No, but all the annexation, the rushes that we're getting right now.
Yeah, we're seeing folks, I mean, as high as maybe the SDC seem, we're still seeing residential development growing at pretty high rates, so I guess that's a good thing. Well, we still got Carl in the room, you got anything else you wanna ask him? He's our transportation expert.
Well, you can think of something.
How
As soon
much,
as you leave the room, we'll figure
how
it out.
much money do we have in our transportation SDC bank?
I don't know, I wanna
Enough.
say 4 million or in that range, I don't know. Martin will pull up the budget real quick and we can
how much annually do you, I mean, between SDC and whatever else you collect in terms of the gas tax and?
How about, let me do this. The other thing that we just got, and I'm just starting to look at, you might not even know about it, but the League of Oregon Cities did a pretty extensive survey on SDCs in the region, well, across the state. So I think 75% of the cities, small and large, responded to this survey. We were one of them. And so I'm starting to see the details of that. We're pretty high on the list, but I can tell you exactly what we reported in terms of revenue for each of the SDCs in each of the categories. It's another massive spreadsheet with lots of information in it, but how about if I bring some of that information in October?
No, it's just interesting. I mean, like, kind of like we have this gap, but like you guys only collect so much at the pace of, you only can accomplish so much a year.
Well, with the new law about annexation, it doesn't have to go before the voters. I would predict that you're gonna be getting a lot of SDCs from new construction in the next few years.
Is this a city law?
Pardon?
The law you referred to where you don't need annexation, voter.
That's citywide, I mean, statewide.
That was okay, I guess that was not.
That's what I was just referring to about the rush of annexations that are.
That would be exciting.
Yeah.
We've done all these concept plans for you
Is
guys
this a
and
ballot
nothing
measure
happens because the
that's
voters
going
didn't want
to
it.
be, or?
Well, they've,
No, that was approved in the last legislative round.
Oh, okay.
is that being challenged, John?
We think it's going to be challenged, but right now it hasn't.
The League of Oregon Cities gonna challenge it, or?
No, I don't think it'll be down.
Home builders will. I think
Yeah.
there's a couple of cities that are doing it.
Home builders won't
No,
either. It's more like, it's more like
They're on the other
Grassroots
side.
Citizen organization will be the ones that probably challenge it.
any folks that, are concerned about growth would probably.
Any more questions?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Let's
Thanks, John.
What's next? Thank you, Carl.
Now we're to the Public Works report.
So, real quick, before I think, what else do I have to, I was gonna talk about the gas tax. Okay, so maybe pull that up, but, I just wanna go through the notes and just do a couple reports on things that, that I think might be, maybe I should have put more together, but I didn't get it done in time. So under, if you look at your minutes from the last meeting, under item 3, Mr. Mahoney said that he would like to look at changing the TAC title from Transportation Advisory Committee to Traffic Safety Advisory Committee. I asked, I kind of looked at the bylaws a little bit because I think I feel like what we did with the Drive Safe Oregon City was more of a subcommittee of this group, and Bob was there, and there was a couple others that were involved in trying to do the Drive Safe Oregon City. I guess just looking at the purpose and looking at our goals, to me it doesn't seem like we should go changing the bylaws and the definition of what this group does. It seems like it's pretty well laid out, but I would acknowledge that we did a pretty nice chunk of work there. I still have some questions about distribution of those things. I haven't seen many of them out there on the street, so I think the neighborhoods are struggling a little bit, and maybe we need to look at that. And the CIC didn't meet this month, so I didn't get a chance to really talk to them about it. But just know that I think the Drive Safe Oregon City stuff is a good foundation, and we can continue to build on that. And one of the things that came up that I wanted to also touch base on was the suggestion that we look at, where's it at? The what? No, there was another suggestion. I'm drawing a blank. Anyway, let me just say that it's good work. I just don't think we ought to dabble in trying to change who we are and what we do on this committee, especially with all the good work that's been going forward. And then there was a couple of folks that testified about vibration on Lynn Avenue and the bus traffic on Lynn Avenue. And so I just wanted you to know the Lynn Avenue project bid and bids were open. They're actually going to start construction. They're going to start mobilizing next week for that Lynn Avenue project. So from Pearl Street down to 4th or
Jackson,
5th,
I think.
we're going to be doing sewer work along there. And so I've asked that project manager to take a closer look, maybe get some photos of foundations and, you know, just try to get a better assessment. I'm not talking a vibration analysis assessment. I'm talking more just kind of a better assessment of what's really going on there, because sometimes it's maybe the noise, or it's kind of like that speeding problem. Sometimes people feel like if they're standing at the edge of the road or on their porch and they're watching traffic go by all the time, they think it's all speeding, when in fact most of the time it's not. I think we may have some of that going on with this vibration thing. So I just wanted you to know that we're at least gonna do that and try and take a better note of what some of those problems might really be. Go ahead.
Should look at the windows on those buildings too.
Find out if they're already cracked or not.
Well, no, if they're single pane without storm windows, you're like living inside of a drum.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I mean, I notice it at my house, and I know what windows I have. And I notice that whenever I get a good loud noise, the windows will vibrate. I can feel it. And that's just like living inside a drum.
Interesting. Well, we're gonna look. The other thing is we did the water line work down there, so there's trench crossings that, I don't know, maybe they're a little rough. I thought that we did a pretty good job paving it, but I don't know what the scenario is. It's kind of hard when somebody comes in and says, you know, the bus traffic is resulting in a bunch of vibration that's impacting my house. The best you can do is try and
The house is
just do
150 years old.
an assessment of that and try and figure that out.
Only 100.
Also, just wanted to mention, so the Drive Safe Oregon City, I do think the neighborhoods are kind of struggling to figure it out. I don't know, Bob, if you guys have made any contact with anybody, but I think.
I put up 9 today.
Okay.
I've seen a
But
few
I
out.
haven't seen, we kind of divided them up amongst the steering committee, and I haven't seen much action from the others, so I guess I'll have to get reminders out.
I've seen a few in the McLaughlin neighborhood out.
Yeah, Denise told me that, you know, she is kind of, she wasn't planning to walk door to door like we'd kind of laid out those plans, so maybe going door to door, but, you know, that's a big commitment to ask people to do. It's kind of like canvassing for candidates or something, so, I mean, one approach might be to just wait till the garbage day and go out and stick those stickers on people's garbage cans without asking them for it, but I don't know, you know.
That's what I did today.
Is that what you did today?
But I knocked on doors. If people were home, then I gave them the choice of the 3 stickers. Which one would you like? But I told them, I said, the Transportation Committee, in association with B&B Leasing, is, we've got this safety campaign going, and we're putting these stickers on the garbage cans. Which of these 3 do you want on your garbage can?
Yeah.
And it's only had one person turn me down.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So anyway, I know Denise she was gonna try the Nextdoor, online, what's that, social media. Yeah, so, you know, at this point, we're just kinda hoping for a little more visibility on that, cause I'm guessing there's several people that are, you know, committed volunteers, but just struggling to get to that and have a box of them sitting in their office somewhere, you know, waiting to be distributed. And so if that's the case and we learn that, then I think we need a backup plan. So Bob, if you could come to the what is it, CIC meeting in October. That's the first Monday of the month, and just check in. And you know, I heard a little feedback from folks on that committee feeling like they were getting kind of asked to do something that they didn't necessarily have, you know, any input on, and that's probably true, but.
Yeah, but it's kind of strange because every neighborhood meeting that I went to over the last year, one of the main concerns is traffic safety.
Yep. But-
we give them an opportunity to maybe help with it.
Yeah.
It's kind of disappointing that they don't want to help.
Maybe they just wanted us to do it and solve it for them instead of taking responsibility for it themselves.
Yeah, I know when I asked my neighborhood chair in Berkeley Hills, he just had no clue how to go about distributing.
Yeah.
Like he had the stack and no idea what to do next.
I still think it'd be a great project for the Boy Scouts.
And that was the suggestion I made to him, was see if we had a Boy Scout troop that would be interested in helping with that.
Merit badge, it'd fall right in line with some of those programs.
Well, I mean, again, I think it does need to be driven by volunteers, so that's a volunteer effort if that's a way of doing it. And then I just think in October, if we could reach back out to those folks that we handed those to and find out if, you know, if we need to think about a different way. I think that's probably up to the TAC to figure out how to do that, whether it's Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or just walking around sticking them on, you know, the TAC membership themselves. That'd be fine.
Well, the fact of the matter is, the reason I put them on garbage cans that I couldn't get a hold of people with is that they are actually owned by B&B. We have the blessing of B&B. And so that's the reasoning, that's what my thought process was.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so.
Gary, who's not here today, Gary Johnson, one of your TAC members, said he felt that the first step, in the bylaws, there's a neighborhood traffic management plan. It suggests that we, you know, review a neighborhood traffic management plan. Well, we don't have one. So I sent out an email just yesterday to the staff for Clackamas County agencies. We meet monthly to talk about transportation related things. So I sent it to that group and seeking out other agency neighborhood traffic management plans. And so I've already got a couple of responses from that. We'll continue working in that direction. Still not sure it's in our work plan, but we'll at least bring the information to show you what's available. It may be as simple as taking our Drive Safe campaign webpage and adding a couple of simple documents to it and calling it good. And Bob, you had some correspondence with Laura about some land use stuff. Did you want to provide any update on that?
I'll update everybody on that. As we all know, there are 3 different concept plans in Oregon City. We've got South End and Beaver Creek Road and Park Place concept plans. A lot of work went into developing those concept plans. And since the new law, which allows annexation without voter approval, is now in effect, I think we're going to see a lot of builders trying to get annexations. We have one currently coming up in Park Place, which will be the first large annexation so far in the city. And I forget how many homes are projected for that. But I had a meeting with Laura Turway about approaching the Planning Commission and giving them an update and an educational presentation on what the concept plan is comprised of for particularly Park Place, since it will be the first one of all the 3 concept plans to be developed in a large area. And that concept plan, I think, was approved in 2007 or 2008. I don't think any of the planning commissioners were on the commission at that time, but the development stage then will be when they become involved in it. And I think it's important that the planning commissioners know first how the concept plans came about, what their purpose is, and then in particular the area of the Park Place concept plan that is being proposed for development. Now the funny thing was, when I had my first meeting with Laura, we were talking different language, because I was aware of the projected annexation area in Park Place because the developer has already addressed the Park Place community, the neighborhood association, on that. About halfway through our conversation, she was looking through her computer like crazy, and she said, "Bob, I can't find anything on that." And I said, "Mean you can't find a request for an annexation to that?" "No, it's not here." So I finally realized that I knew something she didn't know about, and she didn't have anything, information on it at all. So it came about that they have already contacted the neighborhood association, so we know the annexation is gonna be asked for, and the development is gonna come along, but they haven't yet contacted the city to notify them of their actions. So I've contacted John, asking him that maybe this will be an opportunity for the TAC to take some early on action to help advise the planning commission on down the line when it gets to the development stage. Because, well, that's one of our jobs, is to advise the city commission, the planning commission, urban renewal commission. So if we get involved with it early on, trying to figure out some of the things like, where's the money gonna come from all these projects? Like, there's two big extensions, the Holly Lane extension up to Holcomb Boulevard, and the Swan Avenue extension, which is gonna be involving building new bridges. Which, that alone, where's the city gonna get the money? It can't come from just the SDCs because there's too much money involved.
So I have a question regarding, so when somebody, let's say me, decides to annex part of the thing that's not in the UGB and bring it in, and I'm gonna be building, 1,000 homes, streets, all that stuff. Well, that's really on me, but then that comes with all the SDC fees. If there's no a road going there, or if there's no sewer going there, no water going there, are they then going to be responsible on extending those services and making improvements in order to get the development go through, or the city will also have to? I mean, can they build this thing and then leave these roads untouched because then they just pay their STC fees, or they have to bring it into the compliance?
So, I sound like a lawyer here, but sometimes it depends. But for the most part, the developer is responsible for all the on-site improvements, whether it's requiring a arterial through that development or a residential street.
I get that, yeah.
They're required to build all that. The off-site improvements, again, they're for transportation, well, for water, sewer, somehow they gotta get those services, right? So typically, they would be required to build the infrastructure, required to get it from wherever it is to wherever they are, right? So they'd have to build those, and they'd have to bring that in. Transportation, they may not necessarily have to build the full arterial to get everybody there, but they'd have to look at key bottlenecks to make sure there wasn't any safety problems associated with, or major delay problems associated with that development that they would have to take on. And so that's generally, they're required to get everything there. The caveat to that is, and they have to pay SDCs for every home or business or whatever's built. They can ask for reimbursement for some of those costs associated with the larger scale stuff, like arterial, for instance. So if you build an arterial and it's on our list, you may qualify for an SDC reduction or a reimbursement. And that would be true, especially for, let's say, if you're at Park Place and our water line is down at Redland Road, for instance, and we needed to run it up Redland Road several thousand feet to even get to your property. The water master plan calls for a 12-inch water line. You're likely going to get reimbursed through our SDCs for building that pipeline.
But what happens if, let's say that, go back, just use the water line as an example, if that water line cost $1 million and it's 700,000 in SDCs creditable, so they get, they still responsible paying for that $300,000 and then somehow getting reimbursed from the city down the road for it, or how does that work?
We haven't had much like that, and I imagine there'd be some policy discussion about how to deal with that, but for the most part, we've never had anything quite that significant. You know, we have had projects that cost more than they get in SDC credits, and the way the code is written is they only get their credits and they absorb the rest.
Okay.
But, you know, I mean, I imagine for a large-scale project, you know, the other difference is Beaver Creek Road right now, for instance, we're looking at, we're designing a sewer line that would extend out into the Beaver Creek concept area, and we may pay for that up front. That's kind of unusual, but it's, you know, a way in which utilities would be extended out there, and we think it's one of the reasons why that area, the concept area, hasn't moved forward. You know, along with the LUBA appeals and those kind of things, but yeah. So.
Well, my interest in this is, well, obviously I live in Park Place. I'm the chair of the Park Place Neighborhood Association. But my main interest is that this is the first concept plan area to be developed for any large area. Park Place is unique in its topography because it has a lot of hills and a lot of gullies and a lot of little streams throughout it. The other two are pretty much flat areas, pretty much. And so if the city can get it done right in Park Place, they can very easily get it done right in the other two when they're developed, because their problems will be much less. For example, water lines, sewer lines, you know, going from Holcomb Boulevard down to Redland Road, that's quite a drop in elevation. There's two major streets that are forecasted to go down from Holcomb area down to Redland Road. That's a lot of money involved in those. But if they're not put through, then the traffic on Holcomb Boulevard is going to be even worse than it already is. So anyway, I want to try to get a jump on this before it's too late. And in our conversations with the Planning Commission, it was kind of decided that we can't really do too much to help them in the normal time frame, because they're limited to, 120 days to make a decision. Whereas with these concept plans now, we've got a lot of lead time here. We can develop some interesting information and solutions to problems that'll be in place when they're developed. It's kind of like the City Commission and the Planning Commission now going through the exercise of marijuana solutions. They don't know whether it's going to pass or not, but at least they've got the vision going forward to plan for it in plenty of time. I have a meeting this Thursday, again with Laura, because John forwarded my email to him on to her, so she's in the loop, and I have another meeting with her Thursday. She's on the 26th, I believe it is. She's going to give a presentation to the Planning Commission on concept plans in general, and I asked her to try to be specific about the north, what they call the North Village of Park Place, but I'm not sure she'll want to get into that detail, but she did ask that we be in attendance so that if she misses anything or there's something there that we feel is vital to the Planning Commission to have information on, that we could go ahead and give our part of the presentation at that time. And so maybe Bob should not even be listening to this.
I don't listen to anything.
Okay, good. I knew you'd never
That's why
listen to me.
That's why I get accused of it.
So no, I think he's okay to listen to it, but so our entire steering committee plans to attend that Planning Commission meeting, and we'll give information specifically to the Park Place concept plan. So that's where I'm coming from on
What day is that meeting? The Planning Commission meeting?
26th, I believe. It's their next one. It's next week, I think.
You know, the state legislature has really changed the dynamics of this land use field that we're all in, the growth of communities, through their adjustment to the annexation procedures. But what I've noticed over the extended period of time, it used to be with development, your engineers and your architects and designers and planners would be involved, and the larger the project, the more involvement. But because of the legal process due to Senate Bill 100 and some of the other case law that we've developed in the state of Oregon, you add one more to the mix, and that's the attorneys. And when there's this kind of money involved, tens of millions of dollars to extend this, and who's going to pay for that, and what the law says, and appeals to LUBA, the attorneys get involved, and now you've got a legal process to deal with, and it gets pretty involved. A lot of questions are asked, and it all pretty much revolves around the cost of development. So, boy, it's not for the faint-hearted anymore. It used to be, but not anymore. It's just too involved.
So Bob, I think the other thing I wanted to give you an update on was 12th Street and Washington Street intersection. So DKS completed their analysis of that intersection. If you remember, we had several accidents in the intersection. They've completed that report. It's online. I think, I'm trying to remember if we actually presented that to you folks at the last meeting, but basically the warrants for the intersection, two of them were met and two others were very, very close to being met, and they thought they'd be met by the time we, a few more trips and we start. So in 2017, it was indicated that we would meet those warrants. So we're moving forward with a design contract with KPFF, which is another consulting firm, to do complete the design of the signalized intersection there, and at least get it to 90%. We're not quite sure how we're going to fund that, but some of it's SDC fundable, so we've got the money for that. But it's the other unidentified funding piece that always kind of comes in. So maybe this particular initiative that's on your screen here might help fund that. I'm not quite sure. And I want to get to that, but I'm going to save that for last. And so, Martin, can you do summer construction updates, since you've been heavily involved in that?
So moving through the last stages of our big push on summer construction, I'm sure most of you have seen or been impacted by the pavement maintenance work that's being done around the library the last few weeks. Was a little bit of a crunch, but we got everything done in time with a really nice product that we're happy with. We did get a few calls, but in majority of them, once we explain it's minor inconvenience for a long-term gain, and you get a brand new library with brand new streets, literally brand new streets. Most people understood. That work is finishing up on the work here in the McLaughlin neighborhood. We have about another 2 weeks worth of work outside of the McLaughlin neighborhood, and then we'll be completely done for the summer. 15th Street water main project is moving along. Not so much transportation related outside of some of the inconveniences associated with it. That project has about another 5 weeks of construction to finish out. They're projecting substantial completion by the end of October. And I think they're running maybe 4 or 5 days behind on that schedule. And then the only other big project that's going to have any sort of transportation impacts, John had mentioned earlier, we've let out and awarded the contract for the 5th Street sanitary sewer improvements, which will have some impacts to the traffic along 5th Street, primarily on the downhill side. But we'll work with the contractor and staff to try and minimize the impacts. Oh, and the only other thing is this year we're kicking off the 2017 summer construction planning 3 months earlier than we previously done it, so that we can get started that much earlier with physical construction next summer.
Good idea.
Any prediction on how long Main Street is going to be closed to the north end?
So the Cove project, we closed Main Street extension between 15th and Dunes Drive. There's actually, you can come in there, there's a little parking area for the trailhead now that they've created, kind of on the north side of Main Street extension. Their original plan was to complete their work by October 31st. we thought that was very aggressive, but yet, there's a lot of community interest in seeing that project move forward, so they're moving forward. We've had a lot of issues with, kind of some of the design work that's involves the public infrastructure piece. Most of that's a grading project, for those of you that have been following it very closely. It's a lot of grading, a lot of dirt moving. But there is some public infrastructure as well. There's water and stormwater, and obviously the roundabout. And so we're still working with them on that, but it seems like right now it's looking more like they're going to want to work through most of the winter and keep that roadway closed. So it'll probably be through the first of 2017 before we'll see that back open again.
They're probably trying to bring all the fill for the site.
Yep. Right now they're focused on moving dirt from what we call the North Park area, which is kind of behind the wastewater treatment plant, and pile it up and compact it and do all that they need to do with it on Lot 2, which is right behind the Oregon City Shopping Center. So it's that's to us, it's not moving as fast as we'd like to see it move. And, we're keeping our fingers crossed, because that's all they can't do a lot with that once it gets wet. So we'll see. We'll just see. I mean, it's one of those things where we went ahead and issued permits as quickly as we could, although there was a lot of submittal information, and now because of that rush, we're seeing a lot of redesign work on the utilities. So we continue to jump through some pretty big hoops just to keep that moving, but it's a private development project that we feel we need to participate in to kind of keep it going. So we're doing the best we can. We think we got a good developer and a good contractor. It's just sometimes it takes quite a bit to get the amount of equipment and momentum that you need there, and design effort to get it done. But yeah, so that's the Cove. And then I know Martin and Lisa and Bob, you guys were all at the Drive Safe Oregon, or at the National Night Out, where you covered Drive Safe Oregon City. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Bob?
No, I think we had a lot of interest. A lot of people were, I think, pleased to hear that we were doing something.
Okay. So with that, I'm going to go through this, and I think that's it, right? I don't know if I'm forgetting anything. There's some informational items, but so wanted to talk a little bit about the Clackamas County Motor Vehicle Fuel tax. Do it in a way that's not necessarily advocating for it, because as public agency, we really can't advocate for it. But we can give you information. So the ballot measure is ballot measure 3-509. It's a 6-cent fuel tax that the county would assess at fuel stations inside the county. It's a time-limited tax, so at the end of 7 years, they've committed to stop charging this additional 6 cents a gallon. The interesting thing was the county agreed to a split in an effort to get cities to not oppose the measure. They've agreed to 60% of that going to the county and 40% going to the cities. And so annually, that's for Oregon City, that represents just under $600,000 a year, and just over $4 million in the 7-year period. And how they distribute that's kind of yet to be determined, depending on when they start the fee. But we're expecting to see it implemented in March, and get payments every 6 months thereafter. And so this presentation is both to talk about their measure, and they have some information that we just got today that Martin, you want to hand out. There's more of these if you want to take them to your neighborhood meetings or whatever. We're probably going to be posting them here and places like the library, but it's just published information that the county put together, and in a way that doesn't necessarily advocate for it, but it's informational. So they ran that by the state to make sure they were okay to do that, and that's a good thing, so that they don't get in trouble for advocating for measures that, they shouldn't be advocating for.
So the money that the city would get, that would go strictly to the maintenance?
We're gonna talk about that. So, the county has proposed, so this is the county's piece of it, and they're proposing these, what is that, 7 packages, paving packages, and they're pretty much all on county roadways outside the cities. And so this map, you know, represents that work. They've also got detailed cost estimates for each of those projects, so there is more detail. I don't think we're not showing you that information, but they've got detailed cost estimates for each one of those. So for Oregon City and its piece of that 40% that we would receive, we haven't done the work behind a project list or a project estimate, even though we have a long list of projects and that we could do. We looked a little harder at just sharing this. This information has been shared with the City Commission, by the way, but we looked at projects that would improve community health and safety. We'd look at projects that might help our money match for grant requests so that we would be a little more competitive with grant requests. For instance, and I forgot to mention this one even, but if some of you might remember, a couple years ago we applied for a grant for Malala Avenue between Beaver Creek Road and 213. We're doing that again. This time we've kind of re-scoped it a little bit to you know, dial that project in a little more specifically to bring the project cost down. But we're also finding that it's still an $8 million project, and we're proposing to match that grant with $4 million. So we're asking for just under $4 million from Metro, and we were proposing to provide another $4 million to cover the full project costs. And we can cover that with or without this tax proposal, but if we got it, we would probably utilize some of that funding for a grant match, enhancement of the grant match. The other categories to improve connectivity. So, you know, more of those complete street kind of projects that take a piece of sidewalk that's on South End Road, for instance, that's got a big gap. Maybe that's a project that we would take on. Effective and efficient management of the transportation system. This is things like, you know, signal interconnect, signal programming, those reader boards that might tell you in 213 and Beaver Creek, hey, it's going to take you 20 minutes to get to 205, you know, go a different way, those kind of things. That's what that one is about. And then it really just kind of gives us some more opportunity to work with developers as they come up. Developers like the Cove, when we realize there's a match, there might be SDCs, but maybe we want a better project or a more extensive project or more complete project. They might be required to build something, you know, again, the Park Place might be a good example of that, where maybe the developer's proposing something and there's a small match associated with it. We would have those funds to be able to utilize for that. So these just kind of go through some examples. Again, we weren't really giving the commission any specifics. We're just kind of saying these. For one, we haven't done any. I mean, for one, we learned about the gas tax pretty late, and so we haven't done a lot of the estimating that we probably would like to get done. And if it comes through, if it passes, we'd kind of like to see it go through a little bit of public involvement to see where if people are in agreement with some of our proposals or if they want to adjust it somehow. But safety, Washington Street and 12th Street, that's our most dangerous city-owned signal. So, you know, we're seeing that one as an area where we probably need to spend some safety dollars. Anything associated with safe routes to school or signalized pedestrian crossings, we think those would be projects that might make sense to spend some of that money on. So it's the county's proposing most of theirs on maintenance. We've got a pavement maintenance utility fee, so we see that 40% would be less likely we'd more likely use the pavement maintenance dollars and coordinate some of these projects, but we wouldn't necessarily spend it on a lot of maintenance stuff.
We're going to need to pause for a minute for Renee to change the discs.
Ready?
All right.
So, again, grant match, we've talked about some of these, Main Street, 10th to 15th, McLaughlin Boulevard. Actually, this is one that's been suggested by the downtown group that we think has merit. Once the cove, how do you better enhance pedestrian connectivity between the Cove and Main Street? So that's another project that we'd probably choose to kind of pursue.
There's no pedestrian, right, between the bridge and, for a distance there, there's a missing sidewalk,
Missing
right?
sidewalk. There is some sidewalk, but it's narrow and So anyway, that's Holcomb Boulevard, the Longview Way project. Bob, you probably remember that one, trying to get sidewalks extended up to your neighborhood. That'd be a good project to be able to try to fund. Yeah, there's lots of projects. I think that's the main point is we've got way more projects than what that would fund. And I think if it passes and then we'll spend some time going through some public involvement to figure out where our priorities are. If we want to spend it on one project or 20 projects, that's kind of what we need to do.
On the Safe Routes to School, has there been any type of analysis done on the missing links and their lengths and proximity to schools, and kind of identifying those really short gaps that could be fixed pretty quickly and easily to complete a system?
I would say an analysis, no, really. It's just our own understanding, right?
We did the sidewalk infill analysis through the GIS system.
True.
And that was,
True.
so about a little over a year ago, we got our GIS team and our streets division team to do an investigation of where we had gaps in our sidewalk system. Had several criteria that we set into the query. One of them being they had to be within the walking requirement distance to a school, which we found out that every street in the city is within the walking requirement distance to a school. Just depends on what age group you're at. The other thing is we also had to calculate for that the slope couldn't be anything greater than a certain amount of slope. Trying to figure out where it makes sense to fit sidewalks, where we weren't just dropping off into an adjacent ditch. So we do have a ready map that's prepared for that. We've figured out where we've got short links, long links, and where we could potentially use some of the gas tax dollars that John had mentioned earlier, advocating for those to be used for a sidewalk infill project. The big thing that we found out is most of the places where we have sidewalk infill, we have stormwater improvements that need to coincide with it because there's no sidewalk there because there's a ditch. So it means piping some of that system in. But yeah, I think we've got a pretty good grasp as to where it's at. We just don't have a program to address how do we start tackling it.
And I guess part of the reason I'm walking down this path is it'd be nice if we can get a prioritized list in some kind of plan. Because once it's in a plan, then it can be grant eligible.
So the difficulty that I've seen working through that, trying to put that list together, is I think we can find internally, either within our existing programs or through this, a mechanism for putting the sidewalk in. Stormwater is a different issue. It's one of our poorest funded programs within the department. And a lot of these projects, while the sidewalk work isn't overly complex, the stormwater work is something that we can't take a bite of it right now.
Yeah. I think I agree with the fact that we've got good data. It's not culminated in an adopted study, which would be something that we could pursue.
But you guys could the missing links or that don't have stormwater associated with. There's probably those would rise on top of things and could be tackled first. And
prioritize based on the low-hanging fruit is what I'm hearing, and I agree. We can definitely do that, and I guess I also misspoke a little bit. We still have the transportation system plan, which listed all those walking and biking solutions that would dovetail in pretty well with sounds like the data that we've collected, and but we haven't done a detailed analysis of that where we've adopted it in
And-
kind of a study form.
For example, Washington County is really successful in their grant applications because they do that planning piece and they're ready to go. When the grants come up, they have it adopted in their plans and they're very successful in getting grants. So I'm just trying to maybe get us thinking about future grants and how we can have a higher success rate.
Yeah. Most of the reason why Washington County is successful in getting grants is because they have some agreement between,
Yeah,
they
that's
can
it.
reach agreement over there about project priorities. We struggle with that in Clackamas County. Again, just making our transportation systems a little bit more efficient, and those are the kind of projects we could do. And then completing, things that are maybe developer driven. A good example of that is the high school and the community college, and some of that development out in the employment area out off of Beaver Creek and Myers Road. So more stuff like that. There's development proposed along Maple Lane, South End Road, Loader Road. Those are all projects that if the development timing was right, it'd be nice to have the flexibility of having some revenue through the gas tax to help support a complete project. And that's it.
Okay, the next item is information only you've got in your packets about the shelters that TriMet is planning for their Orange Line. The next agenda item is future agenda items. I have one.
I forgot to mention something under my report.
Okay.
The Oregon City Public Library grand opening is Saturday, October 15th from 12 to 3. Presentation from 12:30 to 1. So put that on your calendar. That's going to be, I think, a fun event because Maureen has got a variety of things lined up over there, and the library is looking awesome, and the streets that Martin's group paved are looking awesome. So that should be a good event. The other thing, this is much further off, but a project slated to be completed at the end of 2017, so I'm assuming that's the end of the summer 2017, is I-205 paving between I-5 and the Willamette River. So that's just a heads up that's coming.
It's night work though, so stay off the
Between
highway.
between I-5 and
I-5 to the river.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My daily commute's gonna get really rough.
Yeah, but I get off.
most of that is night work anyways.
Yeah, it's all night work.
I get off at exit 10, so can we extend it? just-
Which will get off where? Which direction?
When I'm coming from I-5, I stop at exit 10, so they need to go another quarter mile.
No, I think that's exit 10, right? Isn't that the Westland Oregon City exit?
That's 9.
That's 9. 10 is the one
10
that goes
is-
down
10
into
is
the
the one
Willamette area.
onto
of
99.
West Lane.
Yeah, it takes you,
10.
10, it takes you to Home Depot.
Oh, okay. I should know that. Yeah, you're right. They're going to stop short of that one.
I think that might be like 2018 or $19 maybe.
Well, they are proposing to look harder at the not replacement, but expansion of the Abernathy Bridge. So I'm sure that'll involve some
That'd
paving.
be a big help, boy.
That seems like maybe the bottleneck.
That's the bottleneck right now.
Yeah,
No, I mean, yeah.
both directions.
You know, stupid.
Anything else from me? I guess that's not a question. I think I'm done.
Okay,
think.
the one future agenda item I have is for next month. The nominations for officers for the next 2-year term will be taken from the floor next month. So that's something to think about. Anybody else have any future agenda items? Okay, the Transportation Advisory Committee meeting is adjourned.